back to my channel. I'm Rachel, the owner and creator here at the Eclectic Cottage in Spokane, Washington. Today is Wednesday, and for today's video, I was finally able to finish up my thrift flips that I've been working on for you guys. Last week was just really hectic, and sometimes it's just hard to try and work in my kitchen when I've got customers coming in and out. So unfortunately, I just wasn't able to get my projects completed in time for my Saturday video. And then my goal was to come in yesterday and get them finished and have this video today to you guys early. But I had a migraine yesterday. I haven't had one in years, and for whatever reason, yesterday I just couldn't lose the silly migraine. So I didn't get a whole lot accomplished yesterday either. So here it is, kind of late in the day today, and I finally have everything ready for you guys. I think everything turned out really well. The theme seems to be the primary colors for this video. I hope you like the projects, and without further ado, let's get to today's video. My first project for today is this set of pillar holders that I got at the Goodwill not too terribly long ago. And I love to paint pillar holders because it gives you the option of adding a pop of color into a vignette without committing to having the entire vignette be that color. And in this case, I decided to go with a color you guys have never seen me paint anything with before, and that's red. This color in particular is called Scarlet. It's by Sweet Pickins Milk paint, and this is actually the color of the month for June from Sweet Pickins. So it'll be 35% off, and of course you can find it on my website at www.theeclecticcottagespokane.com. Now, I decided to experiment a little bit with these, and I did not put any extra bond in my paint the first go around. I really honestly thought that the surface of these was rough enough that it would hold on to the paint, but boy, was I wrong. I came in and almost all of the paint was chipped off, so I ended up taking them over to my sink and really washing them well to get most of that paint off. Then, of course, it was back to the drawing board, so I mixed up more paint, this time with the extra bond in it. The only thing is I wasn't really measuring because I needed just such a small amount of paint, so I accidentally added just a little too much water this go around and ended up having to go over these with 3 coats of the paint to get the coverage that I wanted. Now, one thing about milk paint is that since it's a powder form of paint, even if you mix it really well, there still tends to be little chunks that get left behind on your pieces at times. And these pillar holders were no exception. There were a few little chunks that were left behind. So I am grabbing some 220 grit sandpaper and just smoothing them out and getting rid of those chunks. I also wanted these to have a very Americana vintage feel to them, so I am doing some distressing. So I grabbed some harder sandpaper or coarser sandpaper, I guess. For that, I'm using 150, and I'm just going over the corners and the edges, and then putting a little bit of distressing in the middle of the pillar holders just to bring out some of that black color from underneath. And once I was finished with my distressing and happy with how my pillar holders were looking, I took them to my sink and rinsed them. And once they were dry, it left this white film behind. And I've never had that happen with a piece before. I was frankly kind of worried that it was going to show up back through my wax once it was dry. But I went ahead and waxed anyway, just kind of hoping for the best here. And I am applying one good even coat of DIY's clear wax to my pillar holder and then wiping back the excess with a dry shop towel. And again, just kind of keeping my fingers crossed that that cloudiness goes away. It was on both of my pillar holders. It did show up a little bit through the wax once it was dry, not as bad, but I'm hoping that the next step at this point will take care of that. And the next step is some black wax. Now, as I said earlier, I want these to have a very kind of primitive Americana, vintage, very antique-y look to them. So I am going over the clear wax with that coat of black wax, and I'm just using it full strength, putting it on in a good even coat everywhere, and then again just wiping back the excess with my dry shop towel, and I absolutely am loving the result. And as a bonus, the black wax did in fact take care of my cloudiness problem, so I was very happy about that. I'd also opted not to paint the bottom of these pillar holders. They're wood and they already had a nice black finish to them, but I did go ahead and clean them up really well and added some of this black wax to the bottoms as well, just to give them a little protection and just clean them up a little bit better. And I just had to show you guys the difference between the plain Scarlet paint and the black waxed pillar holder. And I absolutely love how these came out with that black wax. I hope you guys do too. My second project is this little mail sorter that I found a while back at Goodwill, and I didn't have any clue when I bought it that it was broken, but it's definitely something I'm going to have to address. But first, I'm taking the little hooks off the bottom and just setting those aside until later. Then it was on to fixing my issue. So I'm using some wood glue and just a little paintbrush to kind of get that down into the crack. And then it's going to be a matter of trying to get all of my clamps where I need them to be, and then setting this piece aside to dry. Once my glue was all dry, it was time to remove my clamps and make sure everything was good to go. Thankfully, it was. And then it's time for some paint. For this project, I decided to go with Pacific by DIY. It's one of the beautiful cottage colors. The great thing about these cottage colors is that they are self-leveling, so no brushstroke marks, and they have a built-in sealer, so it's not really necessary to seal them. Now, the challenge with this piece was getting the paint down inside those little skinny pockets. I thought about only going down part of the way, but I just didn't think it looked right. So I ended up doing the entire inside of the pockets. I know you probably will never see most of it, but at least I know it's all completely done. And I did end up putting 3 coats of paint on this, mainly because I realized after my first coat that I had not stirred my paint well enough the first go round. So once I stirred it up really well, it was a lot thicker and covered much, much better. Now, I also opted not to paint the back of this piece, mainly because it's meant to hang on the wall and no one is ever going to be looking at the back of it. However, I did want to make sure it was nice and clean at least. So I went around the edges, sanded off any paint that had gone over the edges, and just cleaned it up really, really well. Once I had the back all nice and clean, it was time to flip it back over and do a little bit of distressing. So I'm using my 220 grit sandpaper and I'm going around the edges and just bringing out a little bit of that wood tone from underneath. And I'm also going over the flat surfaces to try and bring up some of that wood grain from underneath the paint as well, just to add a touch more dimension and texture to this piece. And once I'm happy with my distressing, I went ahead and rinsed this one off in my sink as well. I didn't have any issues with cloudiness. And then it was time to decorate my piece. For that, I'm choosing to use some pieces of this transfer set called Yellow Bliss. This one's from Redesign with Prima. I had some left over from another project that I wanted to use up. And the beautiful thing about these transfers is that they layer really nicely. So I went ahead and decided which ones I wanted to be on the bottom and then on the top. And I just started with my bottom layer and laid that transfer down. And then I'm going over the top of that with the next transfer and so on. Now, unfortunately, as I was applying the last little flower in the corner here, when I pushed down, the backing kind of separated from the frame just a little bit and it tore my transfer. And it didn't look horrible. I ended up peeling off just a little bit of it that was torn, but in the end, I think it turned out okay. Then I moved on to the upper pocket and I'm doing the same thing there, just layering my transfers one on top of the other and applying them down with that transfer stick while I peel back that piece of vellum, just being careful that all of my transfers laid down. Now you always want to burnish your transfers in. I'm just using a piece of vellum to do that and rubbing my transfers down into my piece to make sure I don't have any air bubbles and that they are well adhered. Then it's on to sealing them. It's always good practice to put some sort of protective layer over your transfers. And for this, I chose DIY's clear wax. Now, so that I had a cohesive finish on the entire piece, I decided to go ahead and go over the whole thing with a coat of that clear wax. This would also help protect the wood in areas where I had distressed it down to where you could see it. Now, normally you don't have to reseal the Cottage colors because they have a built-in sealer, but like I said, I just felt like this would give it a more cohesive appearance. I also worked some wax down into those silly little pockets and wiped that back, and I also flipped it over and used the wax as kind of a sealer and a refresher for the wood on the back as well. Finally, it's time to clean up the little hooks that go on the bottom and reinstall them. And then this little wall pocket is finished. I absolutely love how it came together, and I really hope you guys do too. Project 3 is this little jewelry box that I picked up for free at a garage sale not too long ago. And for this one, I am going in with the Sweet Pickins Milk Paint Bespoke Collection color called Hollandaise. This one is new to me. I've never used it before. And for whatever reason, when I mixed my paint, it was super thin. And honestly, you guys, I really should have just gone and mixed in more of the powder. I don't know why I was being lazy and didn't do that, but I had to pay for it in the end because I ended up having to put like 5 coats of paint on this thing to get good coverage, which normally it should have only been 2 or 3 coats. After I was putting my second coat on, I decided it was just way too difficult to try and paint around the hardware. I didn't want to paint the hardware that was in it. So I ended up stopping and going ahead and taking all of the hardware pieces off. And that made painting much easier. I should also mention that I did add the recommended amount of extra bond to my paint for this because it is a very slickery surface and I wanted my paint to stick and not all chip off. Once I had my little jewelry box painted and I was happy with my coverage, I went ahead and sanded it smooth with some 220 grit sandpaper. Now, as I've mentioned before, Sweet Pickins Milk paint, since it is a powder, can leave little chunks behind. And again, like brushstroke marks, I'm really not a super fan of the chunks either, so I tend to sand them off. I also cleaned up the bottom edges and made sure everything was pretty and perfect on the bottom of the jewelry box. And then I went back in with some 150 grit sandpaper and did a little bit of distressing. Now, it was while I was doing that I realized that even with the extra bond, this paint was very almost not sticking in places to the piece. It was weird. It was almost like I had laid on a skin overlay over the top of my box. And when I was distressing, it would peel a little bit, but sometimes the peeling looked like it wanted to keep going. And I was really kind of worried about having too much of my paint peel off of this piece. So after I cleaned it up again and got all the sanding dust off of it, I decided to try to fix the edges to make sure that no more of my paint peeled off. And so I grabbed out my Sweet Pickins top coat in matte and I used it like I would on a decoupage piece that had peeled up at the corners. And I just went around with a little bitty brush and added some of that medium up underneath the paint and then tapped it back down with my fingers and smoothed it out. This seems to have fixed my problem, so my paint is now well adhered to my piece and not peeling up anymore anywhere. Then it was time to reattach my hinges and all of my hardware, so I did that, and then it was on to decorating. Now, since I seem to have kind of a theme going of primary colors, I decided to go ahead and use this beautiful transfer set. I had some pieces left over of it as well. This one's called Indigo Petals, and I just love the blue over this yellow. So again, I just chose out the piece that I wanted to use, peeled off the backing, laid my transfer down, and I'm just using that transfer stick to rub it down into my piece as I peel back that piece of vellum, just making sure that if I accidentally pull up any of the transfer, I lay the vellum back down and re-rub that spot. Once my transfer's down, I'm burnishing it in with a piece of that vellum to remove any wrinkles or air bubbles. Then I decided I wanted to add just a little bit more, and I had this little bee and a couple butterflies from the same set. So I'm adding those in spaces on the jewelry box as well. And then once those are all applied and I'm happy with how it looks, it's time to seal my paint. Now, since I'd already sealed up the corners and edges with my Sweet Pickins top coat, I went ahead and used that to seal the rest of my jewelry box. So I'm just going over the entire piece with one good even coat of that Sweet Pickins top coat in matte. It's such a beautiful, durable, gorgeous sealer. I just love it. And once I'm done with that, this little jewelry box is finished. I absolutely love how this came out. I'm loving the primary colors, and I really hope you guys do too. for today, you guys. I hope you liked my projects and I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please remember to give it a thumbs up. I so appreciate that. And if you haven't already, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel, and then of course just hit the little notification bell so you don't miss anything. And then don't forget to drop a comment below and let me know what you thought of my projects for today. What did you guys think of that Scarlet color? That is the Sweet Pickins Milk Paint 35% off for this month color. So I think it's great. I just really prefer it with the dark or the black wax over the top of it to tone it down just a little bit, for me anyway. But I think it will be really, really pretty in a very kind of patriotic 4th of July style vignette. So that's what I'm going to be using those pillar holders for. And I really kind of liked the way everything went together, kind of primary colors, the yellow, the blue, and the red. I think it was just kind of a cool coincidence that they all kind of ended up being the primary colors together. So anyway, just a quick reminder, the paint products you see me use can be purchased through me at my website, and that's www.theeclecticcottagesspokane.com. I carry Sweet Pickins Milk Paint and products, of course, as well as DIY paint and products, and I guess they're finally getting in the colored waxes, so I will be placing an order soon for anything that's out of stock from there. And I also carry Recycled Treasures decoupage papers and some Redesign with Prima. So if you're in need of any DIY products, be sure to check those out on my website. For Saturday's video, it will probably be a thrift haul. We did go out on our junk run last week. We hit a couple yard sales as well. We got some cool stuff I'm excited to show you guys, and that will also give me a chance to hopefully get started and maybe get ahead of things a little bit on some projects for the following Wednesday's video. So fingers crossed. Anyway, I hope you guys will join me back here on Saturday for that video. Until then, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week and beginning of the weekend. Thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate it, and I will see you on Saturday. Bye.